A letter arrived with no return address, just a sketch of a shattered mirror and 5 haunting words. "You made me believe again." Keanu recognized the name. It was a boy he'd once mentored. Now locked away, what Keanu discovers when he finds him will change everything you think about redemption. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The folding chairs clattered softly as the last few boys shuffled out of the common room. Keanu remained behind for a moment, standing quietly near the front of the Youth Rehabilitation Center's multi-purpose hall. The walls were scuffed, the lighting dim. A poster near the back read, "Your story isn't over," but the corner had curled, as if time itself had stopped believing. Keanu had just finished speaking, but it wasn't a speech. It never was, not in places like this. He had talked about presence, about stillness, about how sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do is sit beside you and not leave. His voice hadn't risen, his stories weren't polished. They were real. He told the room about a boy who used to run from everything, until he ran straight into someone who stayed. He didn't say who the boy was. He didn't need to. The kids had listened, most of them anyway. A few stared at the floor. One sat with arms folded tightly, jaw set like stone. But when Keanu said the words, "Some people aren't missing, they're just waiting to be seen," that one blinked. Just once. And that was enough. Afterward, a boy named Devante came up. 17, maybe 18, tall, guarded. "You mean that stuff?" he asked. "About not needing to be fixed?" Keanu nodded. Sometimes being seen is more important than being changed. Devante gave a short laugh. "That's wild, man." Then he walked off, but slower, like something had shifted. Keanu gathered his things and stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky overhead was cloudy, the kind that swallowed the stars. He was heading toward his car when a security guard jogged up, holding a package. "Mr. Reeves, someone left this for you after the talk. Said it was important." Keanu took it with a nod. It was light, wrapped in a plain manila envelope with no writing on the outside. No return address. He didn't open it right away. He waited until he got home. It was just past midnight when Keanu sat down at his kitchen table. The house was quiet. No music, no distractions. Just the envelope, resting like a quiet question in front of him. He made a cup of tea he never drank, just letting it steam on the counter as he turned the envelope over in his hands. Then he opened it. Inside was a single, folded sheet of art paper. The weight of it felt deliberate. Keanu unfolded it slowly. A drawing stared back at him. A mirror, broken. The cracks were detailed, etched with precision. Jagged edges fanned out across the frame, some still holding together by thin strands, others separated completely. In the background, darkness, heavy, smudged with charcoal, and, written in shaky pencil beneath the fractured glass, were just 7 words. "You made me believe I still mattered." Keanu stared at it, unmoving. He wasn't surprised by the drawing, not really. What stopped him was the name in the corner. Liam Cruz. He whispered it once, as if to hear it out loud would prove it was real. He remembered Liam. 6 months ago, he'd met him at a halfway program not far from downtown. Keanu had been doing volunteer outreach, sitting with youth who were in that strange place between punishment and possibility. Liam had been one of the quietest, 17, pale, with long black lashes and eyes that never looked up. He had said almost nothing, but he had drawn. Keanu still remembered the sketch Liam gave him after the second visit. A wolf behind a fence, staring through barbed wire, no explanation, just the picture. He had kept it in his drawer. Now this. There was no request for help, no plea, just a drawing and a sentence. And yet, Keanu felt the message was heavier than any call for aid, because it meant Liam hadn't forgotten, and Keanu hadn't either. Keanu sat in silence for a long time. The clock ticked. The tea grew cold. Outside, a single street lamp flickered against the pavement. Still, he didn't move. His fingers traced the lines of the mirror in the drawing, not to analyze it, but to feel what had gone into it. The pressure of the pencil, the hesitation in the cracks, the space between what was broken and what was still holding on. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a whisper in the dark, a thread, and threads aren't left for nothing. He picked up his phone and opened a text window to Sophia. "Do you remember Liam Cruz?" It was late, but Sophia was always awake when it mattered. She replied within minutes. "Yes, the one who sketched wolves." Keanu took a photo of the drawing and sent it. Then he wrote. He sent this. No return address, no message, just this. Sophia replied, "Are you okay?" Keanu stared at the screen before responding. "Yeah, but I don't think he is. Can you find out where he is now?" Quietly. "I'll start now," Sophia texted. Keanu turned the drawing over again. Blank. Just like the silence that follows when someone has spoken their truth and walked away. He thought about Liam, where he might be, why he sent this now, why it didn't come with a plea. Maybe because the boy had already learned not to ask. Maybe because he was hoping someone would care enough to come without being called. Keanu stood slowly, folded the drawing back up and walked it to the small wooden box on his bookshelf where he kept only 4 things. A photograph of his sister, a folded letter from a soldier he once helped, a rosary from his mother, and now this. The sketch slid in like it had always belonged there. "You made me believe I still mattered." It wasn't a cry for help. It was something deeper. And Keanu wasn't going to let the thread break. Not now. Not ever. The first time Keanu walked into Eastview Transitional Center, he didn't bring a script. He didn't wear anything that would draw attention to himself. No leather jacket, no sunglasses, no hint of the red carpet. Just jeans, a faded shirt, and that calm stillness he always carried. He wasn't there to impress anyone, he was there to be real. Eastview sat tucked between an abandoned strip mall and a chain-link fenced storage lot. The windows were narrow and barred, the brick faded from sun and time. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine cleaner, institutional and sharp, mixed with the distant scent of cafeteria food someone had given up trying to improve. Keanu had come for a small session with a group of at-risk boys, ages 16 to 18. Many were in the last phase of juvenile detention, too old for the system they entered but not quite ready for the adult world. Some had been moved more times than they could count. A few had families waiting on the outside. Most did not. He walked into the multi-purpose room, where about 20 boys were scattered across rows of metal folding chairs. Some lounged with arms crossed. Others slouched so low it looked like they might slip off their seats entirely. A few tapped restless fingers against the chairs in front of them. The vibe was tense, not angry, just guarded. Like everyone had learned long ago that hope cost too much to keep around. Keanu paused by the side door before speaking, taking it all in. His job was to talk about resilience, but he already knew that wasn't what they needed, not in the way people usually meant it. They didn't need platitudes or stories about bouncing back. They needed someone to notice they existed without trying to fix them. As he moved to the front of the room, something caught his eye. In the back row, near the farthest corner, a boy sat completely still. Not tapping, not squirming, not posturing, just still. His head was slightly bowed, sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms covered in homemade tattoos. The kind done with safety pins and ink stolen from school supplies. Letters, faces, tags. One with the word useless written in jagged lines near his elbow. But what struck Keanu wasn't the ink. It was what the boy held. A small sketchbook, pages bent at the corners. The boy wasn't doodling. He was drawing with intensity, like the rest of the room didn't exist. Keanu didn't speak to the group. He changed direction. He walked toward the back, past the boys who barely looked at him, and sat down in the empty chair beside the quiet one with the sketchbook. The room went silent. Keanu turned his head slightly and said, just loud enough for the boy to hear, "That's a powerful image you're making." The boy didn't look up, but his pencil paused. The pencil hovered in midair for a few seconds, as if the compliment needed to be measured before being accepted. Then it moved again, fast and focused. Lines darkened, shadows deepened, edges became sharper. Keanu sat quietly beside the boy, not crowding him, not asking more questions, just being there. He leaned back slightly to glance at the page. It was a mirror. Not a whole one, a cracked mirror. Fractures splintered across the reflection like veins of lightning frozen in glass. It was halfway finished, but even in its incomplete form it told a story. Not one of destruction, but of pain, held together. The boy glanced sideways just for a second, then back down. "You're really just gonna sit there?" he asked, voice low but clear. Keanu nodded. "Yeah, unless you want me to leave." A pause, then a quiet "No." Another few seconds passed. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, keeping his voice calm, almost like they were sitting at a bus stop, not in a detention center. "Liam," the boy muttered. Keanu waited a beat. "I'm Keanu." "I know who you are," Liam said, with the faintest edge of irony. Keanu smiled slightly. "Well, now I know who you are too." Liam didn't smile, but something about his shoulders dropped a fraction. The smallest shift, but it was there. "You like mirrors?" Keanu asked, tilting his head toward the sketchbook again. Liam shook his head. "I hate 'em." "Wait, dry one then?" "Because I'm tired of people telling me I'm whole." Keanu sat with that. The pencil stopped again. Liam tapped the eraser lightly on the paper. "They keep telling us to fix things," he said. "Ourselves, our records, our attitude. But no one asks what broke." Keanu looked at him. "So, what broke?" Liam didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said, "My mom left when I was 8. My dad's in Mexico. I've been in 5 homes since I turned 12. Every time I started to get good at something, someone moved me again." His pencil scratched one more line across the mirror. "Now I just draw what I see." Keanu nodded. "Sometimes that's the most honest thing anyone can do." Liam glanced at him again. "And what do you see when you look at that?" He pointed to the sketch. Keanu didn't hesitate. "Something that survived the breaking." Liam blinked, not expecting that answer. He looked back down at the page and stared for a long time. Then he added a single detail to the middle of the mirror. A point of light. Small, barely there, but it changed everything. The rest of the room had faded into stillness. The boys who had once laughed and slouched in their chairs now watched the back row like something sacred was unfolding, something they didn't have the language for, but instinctively understood. Keanu and Liam didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. The connection was there, subtle but alive. Sometimes the most powerful moments weren't spoken, they were shared, like a breath between strangers who suddenly realized they weren't strangers anymore. Keanu stayed with Liam for the remainder of the session. When the counselor gestured that time was nearly up, Keanu gave a short nod but didn't move right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen, then asked quietly, "Can I write something?" Liam hesitated, then flipped to the last blank page of his sketchbook and handed it over without a word. Keanu didn't write a long message, just a sentence. He tore the page out, folded it once, and handed it back. Liam opened it. It said, "Sometimes what's broken reflects what's still true." Liam stared at the sentence for a long time. Then he folded the page again, carefully, and slipped it into his pocket like something fragile. When the time came for Keanu to leave, he stood up slowly. Liam didn't say goodbye, but he didn't look away either. He held Keanu's gaze for a few seconds, quiet, measured, but open. That was more than enough. As Keanu walked out into the overcast afternoon, something tugged at him. He didn't know if he'd ever see Liam again. Places like Eastview weren't made for reunion stories. They were filled with detours, abrupt exits, and too many people getting lost along the way. But still, something about the boy's eyes stuck with him. Later that evening, after dinner and the long quiet of the night settled in, Keanu stepped out to check the mailbox. There was nothing urgent inside, just the usual flyers, a magazine or two. But when he got to his car the next morning, he saw it. Tucked under the windshield wiper, a napkin, drawn in sharp graphite strokes. A wolf behind a chain-link fence. Eyes wide, alert. Not afraid, but waiting. Below it, scrawled in the same careful hand, "Still here." Keanu stood for a long time with the napkin in his hand. He didn't know how Liam had gotten it there, but he understood exactly what it meant. And that was the day Liam Cruz stopped being just another name. He became the boy with the quiet eyes, and a mirror that hadn't stopped speaking. The morning after Keanu received the drawing, he stood in his home office staring out the window, holding his coffee without drinking it. The sketch was still on the table, right where he'd left it. He hadn't framed it. He hadn't put it in the box with the others. Not yet. Something about it didn't feel finished. The lines still echoed. He picked up his phone and called Sophia. "You have a second?" "Always," she said, already sounding alert. "This about the drawing?" "Yeah. I've been thinking about it all night. It's not a goodbye." "No," Keanu said quietly. "It's a breadcrumb." Sophia paused. "You want me to look for him?" "I want to know what happened, where he is, why this showed up now." "I'll dig," she said. "Give me a few hours." By late afternoon, Sophia had answers, but they weren't the ones Keanu was hoping for. "Okay," she said. "This is where it gets frustrating. Liam was still at Eastview up until 3 months ago. Then he was transferred." "Transferred?" Keanu asked. "To where?" "That's the thing. Juvenile parole records show a transfer order to an adult facility due to age. But the trail goes cold right after that." "No forwarding record?" "None, and the facility name is blacked out in the scanned version. It could be clerical, or it could be intentional. I'm calling in some favors." Keanu ran a hand through his hair. He didn't feel angry. He felt something worse. That quiet, familiar ache of someone being lost, while everyone else was busy counting paperwork. Sophia added, "There's no sign of a parole hearing, nothing filed since the transfer. As far as the system's concerned, Liam Cruz just vanished." Keanu exhaled through his nose, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No one just disappears." Sophia's voice softened. "You really think he's in trouble?" Keanu paused, then said, "I think he's alone." That word hung heavy in the space between them. "I'll keep going," Sophia said. "I'll let you know what I find next." "Thanks," Keanu said. "And Sophia?" "Yeah?" "Don't stop digging, not until we find him." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Keanu stayed restless the rest of the day. He moved around his house without a sense of rhythm, starting a book, then closing it, making tea, then forgetting it on the counter. His thoughts kept circling back to one thing, Liam's eyes. Not hardened, not defiant, but quiet. And not quiet in the way that begged for attention, but in the way that feared no one would listen if he ever made a sound. That kind of silence doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from being ignored too many times in a row. By evening, Keanu sat on his patio, phone in hand, watching the shadows stretch long across the yard. He pulled up the last text from Sophia and reread it. No sign of a parole hearing. Last official record stops at the transfer notice. He opened his contacts and called someone he hadn't spoken to in months. Malik Navarro, a former juvenile caseworker who had helped Keanu navigate earlier outreach programs. The kind of man who still believed broken systems didn't mean broken kids. "Keanu Reeves," Malik said as he answered. "Haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on?" "I'm trying to find a kid." "Your usual kind of missing or system missing?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "System missing. Liam Cruz. He aged out of Eastview 3 months ago, got transferred, But now, no trace. Malik's voice shifted instantly. That's not supposed to happen. Even adult transfers leave records. Not this one. Malik exhaled. Give me a day. I know some people still on the inside. Keanu stared out into the dark. If it were your kid, where would you start? I'd start by assuming the system dropped the ball, Malik said bluntly. Or worse, hid it under the rug. Do they still overflow into those old county holding centers? Yeah. Some are half privatized now, though. Harder to trace. Less paperwork, fewer questions. Keanu was quiet for a moment. He sent me something, a sketch, of a broken mirror. There was silence on the other end. Malik finally said, That's not just a message, that's a flare. Keanu nodded. That's how it felt. All right, Malik said. I'll call in a favor, but Keanu, if he's where I think he might be, you won't be able to go through the front door like last time. I don't plan to, Keanu said. Malik chuckled softly. Good, I'll be in touch. Keanu ended the call and sat in silence again. He didn't know what was waiting for him on the other side of this search. But he knew one thing for sure. He was going to find Liam, even if no one else thought it was worth the trouble. The next morning, Sophia called, just as Keanu was pouring coffee into a mug he wouldn't finish. I found something, she said. Keanu didn't speak, he just listened. There's a short-term adult intake center upstate off Highway 74. It used to be a juvenile boot camp. Now it's a holding site for inmates awaiting long-term placement. Most don't stay more than 90 days. Is Liam there? There's no roster, she replied. But I got access to a visitor's sign-in sheet through a contact. Someone named Cruz was logged in 2 weeks ago. Family? Could be. No first name listed, just Cruz, but it lines up with the timeline. Keanu nodded slowly. Then, that's where I start. Sophia paused. Keanu, are you sure? I'm not looking for a headline, he said. I'm not trying to fix the system. I just want him to know someone is still out here looking. There was a beat of silence. Then Sophia said, I'll book the hotel. Keep it under the radar. Thank you. He hung up and looked over at the folded sketch still sitting beside the stove. He hadn't moved it since the night it arrived. He picked it up now, studied it again. The shattered glass, the faint pencil lines, and that sentence, You made me believe I still mattered. The words were simple, but their weight kept growing. He thought back to the napkin drawing, the wolf behind the fence. That too had been a message, but this was something else. It was a question left unanswered. And questions like that didn't fade. They echoed. He placed the drawing carefully in a travel folder, zipped it shut, and carried it out to the car. As he backed out of the driveway, he glanced once more at the passenger seat. Empty, but not quiet. There was something in the air. Not urgency, not panic. Conviction. Keanu didn't know if Liam even wanted to be found. He didn't know what kind of shape the boy would be in, what had happened since he vanished from the records. But he remembered the eyes. He remembered the stillness in the room that day at Eastview. Not angry, just forgotten. And no one deserves to disappear that way. Not if there's still a chance to be seen. Malik Navarro hadn't changed much since Keanu last saw him. His hair was a little grayer, his belly slightly rounder, but his presence was still sharp, quiet and observant, like a man who could walk into any room and read it before he even took a breath. They met at a small diner just outside Riverside, the kind with chipped tables and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the late 90s. Malik slid into the booth across from Keanu with a worn leather folder under one arm. You always call me when it matters, he said, cracking a smile. That's how I know it's real. Keanu nodded. It's real. They ordered coffee, black, for both, and Malik laid the folder flat on the table. Liam Cruz, he said, tapping the name written in ink on the front cover. I pulled everything I could from when he was at Eastview. Keanu leaned forward. What'd you find? Standard intake, no priors before 13. Skipped through 5 homes before landing in the system for real. Petty theft, trespassing, A fight that got labeled as assault. Nothing violent until his last incident. What happened? Malik sighed. He took the blame for a fight between two other kids, said he started it, but the staff suspected otherwise. Didn't matter. It was enough to trigger the transfer review. When you age out of juvenile custody, your file gets reviewed for adult processing. It's not automatic. Some kids get group home placement, others get low-level parole, but the ones flagged as institutionally dependent, they get sent forward. Keanu's jaw tightened. Meaning the systems had them too long to trust them outside. Malik nodded. Exactly. Keanu sat back. So where is he now? That's the problem, Malik said. The transfer paperwork goes cold. Again. Yeah. But I have a theory. He opened the folder and pulled out a printed spreadsheet with a list of case numbers, dates, and what looked like facility codes. This line here, one of the facilities the state contracts out to when regular prisons hit overflow. It's in Tulare County. Used to be a juvenile boot camp called Ridgeway. Got shut down in 2009. Reopened quietly as a temporary adult intake facility. No press release, no public database. Keanu narrowed his eyes. And you think that's where they sent him? Malik nodded. Best guess. The dates match. It's the right kind of facility. And I called a buddy who used to work intake. He said the name Cruz showed up recently. No first name attached, but it's rare enough to pay attention. Keanu folded his hands. So, how do I get in? Malik grinned. Let's figure that out next. Malik reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and leaned back. Here's the thing, he said, lowering his voice just slightly. Facilities like Ridgeway, they weren't built for the kind of care a kid like Liam needs. They were built for overflow, to hold people quietly until someone figures out where to send them. Keanu stared at the printout between them. And no one checks on what happens inside? Not unless someone files a complaint, Malik said. And most of the people in there, they don't even know they have the right to complain. He flipped to the next page in the folder, revealing a few grainy photos. Security fences, dorm-style units, a mess hall. The buildings were squat and concrete, with no signage, no color, just space designed to hold and forget. Keanu asked, Who runs it? Private security contract, Malik answered. Old military guys, some former corrections officers. It's technically state-sanctioned, but they handle their own paperwork. In other words, it's nearly impossible to get a straight answer. Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing the reality. So even if Liam's there, he said, he could disappear under a wrong classification. Exactly, Malik said. And Ridgeway doesn't allow civilian visitation, unless you're a listed family member or legal advocate. Could I go in as media? Malik shook his head. Too risky. You show up with cameras, they shut the gates. Keanu ran a hand over his face. Then I go as myself. Malik raised an eyebrow. And you think they won't recognize you? Keanu gave a half smile. They might, but I'm not going to play a role. I'm just going to ask questions. You'll need an appointment. Then help me get one. Malik reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad. I know someone in the oversight office. She owes me a favor. If I tell her you're looking to quietly check on a youth in transition, she might fast-track a visit. Keanu looked him in the eyes. Let's make that call. Malik nodded, his face serious now. Just understand, Ridgeway isn't built for healing. It's built for time. Keanu stood slowly. Then it's time someone walked in there, not just to serve it, but to change it. Malik grinned faintly. Still trying to rewrite the script, huh? Keanu glanced at the folder one last time. No, I'm just trying to find a kid who was never given one. By the time Malik wrapped up the call with his contact, the diner had mostly cleared out. A server wiped down empty booths with slow, tired strokes, while a neon "Open" sign flickered softly in the window. The world outside hadn't changed, but something inside Keanu had. Malik closed his phone and scribbled a number onto the back of a napkin. You've got a 10 a.m. appointment 2 days from now. You'll need to sign in as a personal visitor under the category of post-release mentorship evaluation. It's vague, and they won't push unless you give them a reason. Keanu nodded. And Liam? She couldn't confirm he's there, but she said someone with the last name Cruz is listed as temporary transitional intake. That's all she'd give me. That's enough. Malik leaned forward. I know this isn't about proving something, Keanu, but I need to ask, what do you think you'll say to him? Keanu stared at the folder for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe nothing at first. Maybe everything he needs to hear. Malik didn't push further. He slid the napkin across the table and added, if he is there, be ready. He's not going to be the same kid you sat beside in that group room. Places like Ridgeway don't just age boys, they harden them. I don't need him to be the same, Keanu said. I just need him to know someone came back. As they stood to leave, Malik put a hand on Keanu's shoulder. You're doing what most of us never get the chance to do. Circle back. Not for closure, Keanu said, but for truth. Later that night, Keanu sat at home in front of a blank journal. He hadn't written in weeks, but something about this moment called for it. He opened to a clean page and wrote, sometimes we meet people before they know how to be found, but they remember the ones who looked anyway. He closed the journal, set it down, and leaned back into the quiet. 2 days. That's all he had to wait. But for some reason, it didn't feel like waiting. It felt like preparing. For what, he wasn't sure. But one thing was clear. This wasn't about fixing Liam. It was about showing up, again, and proving that one drawing, one line of graphite, one folded message still had the power to call someone through locked gates. He didn't know if Liam would be ready to see him. But Keanu was ready to be seen. The Ridgeway facility didn't announce itself with a sign or a logo. It sat at the edge of a dried-out field, surrounded by barbed wire fences and utility poles that leaned like tired sentinels. The entrance gate buzzed open after a long pause, as if the place needed time to decide whether to let a stranger in. Keanu parked in a visitor's lot that could have doubled as a construction site. Gravel underfoot, no lines, no shade. He stepped out, dressed simply in a dark shirt and gray jacket, holding nothing but the folder with his clearance and a form letter from the oversight office. A guard waited by the security door, clipboard in hand. ID, the guard asked. Keanu handed it over. The guard looked at it, blinked, then looked again. He started, then caught himself. Mr. Reeves, you're cleared for a 30-minute monitored session. Inmate has been notified. Inmate, Keanu repeated under his breath. Right. They led him through a metal detector and into a hallway that buzzed faintly with fluorescent lighting. The air inside Ridgeway was cold in that institutional way. Temperature set low, not for comfort, but control. The walls were a dull beige, the floor scuffed linoleum, the kind that echoed footsteps in a way that made you want to walk softer. Keanu followed the escorting officer through 2 more sets of locked doors. Each one clicked shut behind them with a sound that felt heavier than the last. The visitation room was small. A single metal table sat in the center, surrounded by 4 plastic chairs all bolted to the ground. A sheet of scratched plexiglass separated the room from a control booth. Inside it, a guard leaned back in a chair, eyes scanning the monitors without expression. Keanu sat down and folded his hands. It had been over half a year since he last saw Liam. He tried to picture the boy's face now. Not the boy with the pencil and sketchbook, but the version time and isolation might have shaped. He didn't know what to expect. The door opened behind him. Footsteps. Then a figure entered, escorted silently by a second officer. The boy moved slowly, but not hesitantly. He wore a beige uniform, sleeves rolled down, cuffs frayed slightly at the edges. He was thinner, older. His jaw had sharpened, and his arms looked wiry from days that likely involved labor, not recreation. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. Still the same stillness. Still the same quiet ache behind them. He sat down across the table, hands in his lap. A long pause followed. Then, Liam said, almost like an exhale, "You remembered." Keanu looked at him and answered gently, "How could I not?" The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of months gone unspoken, of words neither of them had prepared, and of memories they hadn't realized they'd carried this far. Liam's hands rested lightly on the table, fingers twitching now and then like he wanted to fold them or hide them, but couldn't choose which. He looked older, yes, but it wasn't just time. It was experience. There was a caution in his posture, a heaviness in the way he blinked. But even then, something in him hadn't collapsed. Not yet. "I didn't think you'd actually come," Liam said finally. Keanu offered a faint smile. "You sent something that deserved an answer." Liam tilted his head slightly. "I didn't send it, expecting one." "Maybe not," Keanu replied. "But you hoped someone would care enough to notice." Liam let out a soft breath, not quite a sigh. "They call this place a temporary hold, but it's been 3 months. No word, no hearing date, just days, one after another." Keanu leaned forward, elbows on the metal table. "Have you been okay?" Liam shrugged. "Okay's not really a word we use in here. There's just before and after." Keanu nodded, understanding more than Liam might have expected. They sat for a moment, both quiet. "I thought maybe you forgot about me," Liam said without bitterness. "Just fact." "I didn't," Keanu said. "I remembered that sketch, the wolf, the napkin, and then you sent the mirror." Liam's gaze dropped. That was all I had left. Keanu studied him. "Why now?" "I don't know," Liam admitted. "Something about this place, it makes you forget you exist outside it. I felt like I was disappearing, and I guess I wanted to believe someone might still know I was here." His voice cracked slightly at the end. "You matter then," Keanu said gently. "You matter now." Liam looked up. For the first time since sitting down, something flickered in his eyes that wasn't defense. Not trust, exactly, but its beginning. "They don't let us have much," Liam said, shifting the conversation like he needed distance. "1 book at a time, 2 sheets of paper a week, no mirrors in the cells, nothing reflective, not even the faucet." Keanu blinked. "No mirrors?" Liam shook his head. "They say it's for safety, but honestly, I think they just don't want us seeing ourselves too clearly." Keanu sat with that. "I think," he said quietly, "you've seen yourself more clearly than most people ever do." Liam didn't respond, but his hand stopped fidgeting. A voice crackled through the overhead speaker. 15 minutes remaining. Keanu glanced toward the guard behind the glass, then back at Liam. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" he asked. Liam shook his head, not out of defiance, but weariness. "You don't need to know all of it." "I don't need the whole story," Keanu said. "Just whatever part you want me to carry." Liam looked at him for a long time, as if measuring whether it was safe to say anything at all. Then he spoke, low, deliberate. "It wasn't even my fight. Another kid was getting jumped. I stepped in, pushed one of them back. That was it. But they said I started it." "And no one questioned it?" "They don't question anything here," Liam replied. "They file it, stamp it, move you on." Keanu exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing." Liam's face tightened. "It didn't matter." "It does now." For a second, Liam's jaw clenched, like he was fighting something in himself. Then, finally, he said, "I sent the mirror because I didn't know how else to say thank you." Keanu nodded. "You didn't have to say it," Liam added. "But I needed to." Another pause stretched between them. "Sometimes I think about that group session," Liam said. "How you didn't talk to the whole room, you just sat next to me, like I wasn't invisible. You never were. But I felt that way, for a long time." Keanu leaned forward. "Can I tell you something?" Liam nodded. "You're still the kid I sat beside, even with more weight on your face, even in this place. The mirror didn't crack you, it just reflected where you've been. It doesn't define where you're going." Liam blinked, and this time, he didn't try to hide the way his eyes shimmered. Another voice crackled. 5 minutes. Keanu straightened in his seat. I'm coming back. Liam raised an eyebrow. Seriously? As many times as it takes. Liam gave a half smile. It was small, uncertain, but real. You know, he said, for the longest time, I figured I'd just vanish. No noise, no notice. Keanu stood. That's not going to happen. Liam stood too, slower, almost hesitant. You sure? Keanu nodded. I didn't come here to forget you. I came because you're still here. The guard opened the door behind Liam. He turned once more, eyes steady, and whispered something only Keanu could hear. Thank you for not letting the glass be the last thing. And then he was gone. Keanu sat back down and placed both hands on the table. The mirror wasn't broken. It had just been waiting to be held again. 2 days after the visit to Ridgeway, Keanu sat quietly at his kitchen table, laptop open, coffee untouched. A blank document glowed on the screen, waiting for words. The sketch Liam had sent him was beside the keyboard. It hadn't been framed or archived. It sat exactly where it needed to be, in reach. Sophia had called that morning. Are you ready to share it? She asked. He hesitated. Not the names, not the details. Of course, she said, just the heart of it. Keanu leaned over the keyboard and began typing. He didn't mention the prison or the cracked mirror. He didn't mention Liam's name or where they had first met. He simply described a moment, a time when someone reached out with nothing more than a sketch and a thank you, a note that said, "You made me believe I still mattered," and the feeling of walking into a place where time was a punishment, not a teacher, just to return that belief. At the end of the post, Keanu wrote a single line. Have you ever said thank you to someone who changed your life? Share your story below. They posted it on the Foundation's page. No hashtags, no press. Just silence. For an hour, nothing happened. Then one comment appeared. My 10th grade math teacher sat with me after class every day for 2 weeks when my mom was in rehab. She never asked why I was failing. She just said, "You're still here. That's enough for now." I never got to say thank you. Until now. A few minutes later, another. There was a janitor at my middle school who gave me a notebook after I got jumped. He said, "Write it before it rots inside." I wrote every day after that. I'm a poet now. And then it snowballed. Stories poured in. Of a nurse who held a hand longer than protocol allowed. Of a stranger on a bus who said, "You okay?" when no one else ever did. Of an old neighbor who left snacks on a doorstep during lockdown, just to remind someone they weren't alone. By the end of the day, the post had over 11,000 comments. No controversy, no argument, just gratitude. People weren't responding to a celebrity. They were responding to the idea that someone, once, had seen them. By the third day, something unexpected began to happen. Mail started arriving at the Keanu Reeves Foundation. Not emails, not digital notes. Real letters, envelopes handwritten with care. Some had stamps from rural towns. Others bore return addresses from cities, some from shelters, others with no names at all. Sophia called Keanu after sorting through a pile. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "They're writing back, not to us, to someone from their past." She held up one letter and read part of it aloud. "Dear Mr. Kent, you probably don't remember me. I was the kid who stole your hall pass twice in 8th grade. You caught me, but you never yelled. You just said, 'You must be braver than you think to keep coming back.' I didn't understand it then. I do now. Thank you for seeing me." Another was addressed simply, "To the one who didn't forget me." Each envelope carried more than a memory. They carried closure that had never been spoken, forgiveness that had waited too long, gratitude that hadn't known where to go until now. Keanu drove down to the office that afternoon. Sophia had set aside a large box labeled "Mirror Letters" and filled it with the responses. He sat beside the box, reading through a few quietly. Every story felt like a doorway into someone's soul. One was from a woman who had been homeless at 17 and remembered the librarian who let her sleep behind the history section for 3 nights and left granola bars near the encyclopedias without saying a word. Another came from a man in his 60s, now a father and grandfather. He wrote about a roommate in college who once said, "You talk like you've already failed. I don't think you have." That sentence, he said, saved him from suicide. Every letter seemed to echo Liam's sketch in its own way. Something had cracked in them long ago, but they were still reflecting, still surviving. Keanu picked up a short note on folded yellow paper. It had no name, just one sentence. "I'm still here because someone held space for me when I didn't know how to ask." He set it gently in the box. Outside, the sky had begun to dim, but the room didn't feel dark. It felt full, like 100 thank yous had finally found their voice. And all of them had started with one sketch. That weekend, Keanu and Sophia sat together in the Foundation's front room with the box of letters between them. A soft rain fell outside, the kind that blurred windows and softened the world's edges. Inside, it was quiet, except for the sound of envelopes being opened and stories being rediscovered. Sophia handed Keanu another envelope. "This one's from a high school freshman," she said, "wants to start a project." Keanu unfolded the letter and read silently. "Dear Foundation, I don't have a big story, but your post made me ask my grandpa who his mirror person was. He told me it was a janitor at the auto shop who used to say, 'Every engine just needs time and someone who listens.' So I made a poster and put it in our school hallway. Now everyone's writing on it. We call it the thank you wall." He looked up at Sophia, and she was already smiling. "That's the 3rd school to do something like that," she said. 2 libraries have mirror sketch corners now, and an art teacher in Portland started something called Reflect Week. Students draw the people who saved them. Keanu nodded, humbled. "All from one sentence." Sophia added, "It's like the whole world was just waiting for permission to say thank you." Later that night, after the letters had been filed and candles lit around the edges of the room, Keanu walked into the quiet hallway outside his office. On the wall hung a framed print of Liam's mirror sketch. Just above the frame, a simple wooden plaque read, "You still matter." He stood in front of it, thinking not of headlines or campaigns, but of a boy who once sat silent in a detention center, drawing his pain into paper because there were no other safe places to put it. And he thought of how that pain, left unspoken, had somehow become light for strangers who would never meet him. Maybe that's what healing was, not erasing what hurt, but making it speak in a new voice. And maybe it was contagious. As Keanu turned out the lights and locked the door, Sophia called after him softly. "Mail truck's coming again tomorrow. They asked if we want a second bin." He smiled to himself and said, "Better make it 3. Because somewhere another person was writing. To the teacher who never gave up. To the coach who didn't yell that one time. To the stranger who looked back instead of walking away. They were writing because of a boy with a sketch pad and a mirror full of cracks. And now, the cracks were shining. Keanu's next visit to Ridgeway came on a morning when the clouds hung low over the hills, the sky dim even though the sun had technically risen. He walked into the visitation room to find Liam already seated. This time, Liam looked different. Not just calmer, but like he'd made a decision. There were no drawings on the table, just silence, waiting to be filled. Keanu sat across from him. "You okay?" Liam nodded, then took a breath. "I think I'm ready to tell you what happened." Keanu didn't push. He just folded his hands and listened. "It wasn't some big gang thing," Liam said. "Not some wild fight in the yard or anything you see in movies." He paused, trying to find the words. "There was this kid, Marcus, 15, quiet, kept to himself. His first week in, small, scared. You could tell he didn't know how to act tough, but he tried." Keanu nodded slowly. "Some older guys were messing with him, took his food, knocked over his stuff. He didn't say anything. He just kept cleaning up, starting over. Liam's jaw tightened. Then one day, it went too far. They cornered him in the laundry room. I heard the yelling. I was supposed to keep my head down, right? That's the rule. Keanu didn't speak. But I didn't. I walked in and one of them had him by the shirt. The kid's lip was bleeding. The other two were laughing. He blinked hard, trying to stay steady. I didn't plan anything. I just told them to stop. One of them shoved me. The rest happened fast. Liam looked down at his hands. Boom, punch. That's what it took. I knocked the biggest one to the ground. I think his head hit the metal bin. He wasn't unconscious, but he needed stitches. And you were the only one charged? Keanu asked. Yeah, they all said I started it, even the guard who showed up afterward. I guess it looked like that. And the boy you helped? Liam's voice dropped. He never spoke. He just kept his head down, same as before. Keanu leaned forward. He was scared. I know, Liam said. But the silence, that's what hurt most. He looked up, eyes steady now. No one stood up for me. Not the staff, not the kid, not even my file. Keanu asked gently, "What did the judge say?" Liam's lips curled slightly. He looked at my record and said, "Some boys grow up in places that never teach them restraint." Then he signed the order. Liam leaned back slightly, his hands still folded on the table. The thing is, I didn't even try to argue. Keanu watched him closely. The public defender they gave me? I met him 15 minutes before the hearing. He looked tired, told me to plead out. Said the best I could hope for was a short adult placement. You didn't tell him what really happened? I did, Liam said. But it didn't change anything. He said it would be my word against 3 others, one with a busted head. He said if I told the full story, I might sound like I was making excuses. Keanu's voice was quiet. And you believed that? Liam gave a half laugh, one without humor. I didn't have the luxury not to. There was a moment where the only sound in the room was the distant hum of the overhead lights. Keanu took a deep breath, the kind that carried more weight than air. Liam, he said, I'm sorry. You didn't do it. But I wasn't there to stop it either. Liam looked up, eyes tired but not bitter. You couldn't have changed what the judge saw. He didn't look at me, he looked at paper. Keanu nodded slowly. Sometimes justice fails. Liam's fingers twitched once, as if resisting emotion. But people don't have to? That's right. There was a long silence. Then Liam spoke again, voice thinner than before. You're the first one who's ever said that to me. Keanu didn't respond with a speech. He just sat with the truth. Liam glanced sideways, blinking hard. It's not just the sentence, Keanu. It's what it tells you about who you are. When someone stamps a number next to your name, it's like they're saying, this is all you'll ever be. Keanu said, and that's a lie. Liam swallowed. It doesn't feel like one in here. Keanu leaned in. Then maybe we have to build a space where it stops feeling like truth. The weight in the room didn't lift, it deepened, but in a way that made them feel less alone under it. Liam sat quietly, then reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of notebook paper. I wrote down every name of the boys they moved out of Ridgeway the last 2 months, he said. No one keeps track once they go, they just disappear. Keanu took the list gently. I won't let that happen to you, he said. Liam nodded. One, or them, he whispered. Keanu folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He didn't make any promises he couldn't keep, but something in his silence told Liam that the list wouldn't stay forgotten. Liam leaned forward, elbows on the table now, a little closer than before. You know what I kept thinking about after the sentencing? Keanu looked at him. That mirror sketch I sent you, the broken one. Keanu nodded. I remember. I wasn't just drawing what I felt. I was drawing how I thought people saw me. Like once you've got cracks, they don't look at anything else. Keanu replied softly, but those cracks let light through. Liam gave a small smile. You're still holding onto that line? Keanu smiled back. You're still proving it's true. The boy looked down for a moment, fiddling with the edge of his sleeve. Then, quietly, it scared me, you know. You coming back? Wait, what? Because I didn't want to be a disappointment. I thought, maybe you remembered the kid with the sketchbook, not the one who ended up here. Keanu sat back, his voice firm but kind. I remember the kid who stood up for someone smaller, who took a hit for someone else and never asked for a medal. Liam's eyes brimmed, but he blinked the tears back. I don't feel brave, he whispered. Most brave people don't, Keanu replied. That's what makes them real. They sat in silence again, this time not because there was nothing to say, but because everything important had already been spoken. When the guard stepped into view, signaling the end of the visit, Liam stood, slower than usual. Not because he was reluctant, but because leaving no longer felt like slipping into invisibility. He gathered the sketchbook from the table and tucked it under his arm. Then, almost as an afterthought, he turned back. Hey, he said. Keanu met his eyes. I'm not going to let them decide who I am. Not anymore. Keanu nodded, his voice low. Good, Liam added. And if you still want me to finish that drawing, the blank one, I think I'm ready. I'd be honored. The guard opened the door. Liam gave one last nod, then stepped through. As the door closed behind him, Keanu stayed seated for a moment longer. The echo of Liam's words, not anymore, reverberated in his chest. The system had written its judgment in ink. But Liam was learning how to write in something stronger. Something that didn't fade. Something no sentence could erase. The next time Keanu returned to Ridgeway, he carried something in his bag. It wasn't large or heavy, but it had weight, the kind that came from meaning. Liam entered the visitation room a few minutes after Keanu sat down. There was no sketchbook in his hands this time. Just a soft look of curiosity, like he knew something was different, but hadn't guessed what yet. Keanu reached into his bag and placed a small bundle on the table. It was wrapped in soft gray cloth, tied with a simple string. Liam eyed it carefully. What's that? A gift, Keanu said. For me? Keanu nodded. Open it when you're ready. Liam untied the string slowly, folding back the cloth with care. Inside was a compact mirror. Simple, round, unadorned, the kind you'd find in a quiet corner of someone's home. Its edges were smooth, the glass clean, no cracks, no smudges. Liam looked at it, confused. Then he noticed the small folded note tucked beneath it. He picked it up and opened it. In Keanu's handwriting, it read, "You decide what it reflects." For a long moment, Liam didn't speak. He stared down at the mirror, holding it between both hands like it might shatter if he moved too fast. Keanu didn't say a word. He waited. Liam's lips parted slightly, then closed again. His throat moved like he was trying to speak, but the words didn't come. And then, he broke. Tears slid down his cheeks, slow and soundless. No sobs, no gasps. Just release. The kind that came from something deeper than sadness, something like being seen, without having to ask. He wiped his face with the edge of his sleeve, but the tears kept coming. I don't think anyone's ever given me something like this, he said, softly. Keanu's voice was calm. It's not just a mirror, it's a promise, that what you see in it is yours to define. Liam nodded, still holding the mirror like it was sacred. I used to avoid anything reflective, he said, even puddles, even windows. I thought if I didn't look, maybe I wouldn't exist long enough to disappoint anyone. Keanu leaned forward. And now? Liam looked down again. Now, I want to see who I've survived becoming. The mirror caught a little light from the overhead bulbs. Not bright, but enough. It shimmered gently between his fingers. He looked up at Keanu, and this time, he didn't look like a boy trying to disappear. He looked like someone stepping back into himself. After a long silence, Liam placed the mirror gently back on the cloth, smoothing the fabric around it like someone tucking in something precious. Keanu waited, then reached into his bag again. This time, he pulled out a clear folder. Inside were high-quality prints of Liam's original sketches. Each one had been carefully scanned, cleaned of smudges, but left exactly as he'd drawn them. No edits, no captions. "I wanted to ask you something," Keanu said, laying the folder on the table. "Something important." Liam leaned forward. "We're planning a new display at the foundation," Keanu continued. "A rotating wall for art that speaks to survival, to silence, to truth." Liam's brow furrowed slightly. "And you want to show these?" "Only if you say yes." Liam looked down at the folder. His hand hovered over it, then pulled back. "They're not polished. They're not professional." "That's not what people need," Keanu said. "They don't need perfection, they need honesty." Liam's voice was low. "You think people will want to see them?" Keanu's answer came without hesitation. "I think they need to." Liam let the words settle, then said, "And what would you call it, the exhibit?" Keanu thought for a moment. "Sketches in the margins." Liam gave a short, stunned laugh. "You remembered." "I never forgot." He opened the folder and began sliding through the pages. The cracked mirrors, the floating shards, the outline of Keanu in silhouette. He stopped on the unfinished one, the mirror with the blank reflection. "That one still scares me," he said. "Then maybe it's the most powerful," Keanu replied, "because it invites everyone to step into it." Liam nodded, tracing the edge of the paper with his thumb. "You'd give it a place?" he asked quietly. "Where people actually walk by and stop?" "Not just walk by," Keanu said. "They'll see themselves in it." Liam looked up again. "And you think that's okay? For them to see what I saw? I think your drawings will say what 1,000 speeches can't." Liam sat back, letting the idea bloom in silence. Then, finally, with a slow, careful breath, he said, "Okay." Keanu smiled. "Okay? You can show them, all of them." Keanu nodded, the weight of that permission clear in his eyes. And in that moment, Liam Cruz, once a silent name buried in a transfer list, became something else. An artist, a witness, and a mirror for others who had forgotten they were still visible. The guard signaled that their time was nearly up, but neither Liam nor Keanu moved right away. The moment between them didn't feel rushed. It felt rooted. Keanu picked up the cloth again, gently wrapping the mirror with the same care Liam had shown. He tied the string back around it and slid it across the table. "This stays with you," he said. Liam nodded, resting his hand over it. Then Keanu tapped the folder with the prints. "We'll start framing these next week. I'll send you photos once it's up." "You think anyone will write about it?" Liam asked. "They might," Keanu replied. "But even if no one does, it'll still matter. Because it'll be real." Liam exhaled. "Feels strange, letting people in." "It's brave." Liam smiled faintly. "I didn't draw them to be brave. I drew them so I wouldn't vanish." "And now," Keanu said, "they're going to help other people feel seen." That truth landed like something sacred. As Liam stood, he cradled the wrapped mirror to his chest, not for protection, but like something personal, something earned. "I think I might keep drawing," he said. "You should. And maybe next time I'll draw something whole." Keanu smiled. "Whatever you draw, it'll be honest. That's what makes it powerful." Liam stepped back toward the door, but before it opened, he turned. "One more thing." Keanu looked up. "If people ask who made them," Liam said, tapping the envelope with his sketches, "what should I tell them?" Keanu thought for a moment, then said, "Tell them a kid who used to live in the margins found his voice." Liam smiled for real then, a smile that cracked something open but didn't let anything fall out. The door opened behind him and he stepped through without looking back. Keanu remained seated for a long while after. The room around him was plain, sterile and cold, but the space in front of him, the spot where Liam had sat, felt alive, still echoing. He looked at the mirror, now resting at the center of the table, wrapped again. It wasn't just a gift. It was a beginning. Later that day, back at the foundation, Sophia met him at the door. "You look different," she said. "I feel it." He handed her the folder of sketches. "We have our next exhibit." She flipped through the first few pages and stopped. "They're beautiful." Keanu shook his head. "They're true." Sophia smiled. "Sometimes that's even rarer." And as she carried them down the hallway toward the gallery wall, Keanu stood still for a moment, grateful. The mirror had never been the gift. Liam was. And now, for the first time, the world would see what a reflection could become when it stopped being afraid to shine. The gallery wasn't grand, just a quiet room on the second floor of the Keanu Reeves Foundation in Los Angeles. No velvet ropes, no music, just white walls, soft lighting, and frames arranged with intention. Each sketch hung without a name, no plaque, no artist bio, only a single word beneath every image. Fragment. The room opened on a Wednesday morning. The first to enter were staff and volunteers, followed by a few friends of the foundation. Then a wave of curious strangers, people who had seen the post online or passed the flyer tacked outside a coffee shop. Some came alone, some brought teenagers, a few walked in without saying a word, and didn't speak until they left. Each sketch stood in silence. Mirrors broken and whole, outlined faces and shadowed corners. One showed a cracked reflection where the pieces didn't align. Another showed a silhouette, bent slightly forward, surrounded by floating shards. One, unfinished, featured only a frame and the faint shape of a boy not yet drawn. Next to the door stood a table covered in lined paper and pens. A small sign read, "Take a moment, write what you saw, or what it made you remember." By mid-afternoon, the basket beside the sign was already filling. Keanu stayed in the back corner of the room, not announcing himself. He watched. An older woman stood a long time in front of one sketch, the one where light burst through the cracks behind a seated figure. When she finally turned away, she wiped her eyes and sat at the table. Her hands shook as she wrote. Another visitor, a teenager with sleeves pulled down over her hands, paused at the unfinished mirror. She reached up and lightly touched the glass of the frame with 2 fingers before stepping back. A father came in with his son who couldn't have been more than 8. The boy asked, "Why are all the mirrors cracked?" His dad knelt beside him and said, "Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just not finished yet." Keanu turned away at that, his throat tight. Sophia approached and handed him one of the letters from the basket. "You should read this." It was written in neat blue ink. "My son took his life last year. He was 16. He used to draw things like this. I didn't know what they meant. I just wish someone had seen him the way you saw that boy." Keanu folded the letter slowly and held it to his chest. This wasn't a gallery. It was a gathering of things people weren't allowed to say until now. By the second day, the letter basket had been replaced by a small wooden chest. Sophia had lined it with soft linen and labeled the front. "Responses from the inside out." Dozens more arrived, some short, a sentence or two, others several pages long. A few were anonymous, most were signed with initials, but all of them carried weight. One read, "I served time for something I didn't do, but I never told anyone because no one ever asked." Today, standing in front of that drawing of the bent silhouette, I remembered who I was before the cuffs, and who I might still be. Another came from a retired high school teacher. "There was a boy in my class who never spoke, just drew. I dismissed him as distracted. I didn't know he was surviving. I wish I could find him now and say, 'I see it. I finally see it.'" Keanu spent hours reading them quietly, sometimes in the early morning before visitors arrived, sometimes late into the evening after the lights were dimmed and the room had fallen still. What struck him wasn't just the sorrow, it was the clarity. Each letter was a mirror of its own, reflecting back the lives of people who had walked through shame, silence, or self-erasure, and now, suddenly, had permission to step out of the margins. One afternoon, a small group of young men arrived, participants from a local youth rehabilitation program. They were loud at first, unsure, joking among themselves. But when they stepped into the gallery, the energy shifted. One boy stood in front of the unfinished sketch, the one Liam had drawn last but never completed. He stared at it for a long time, then turned to his friend and whispered, "That's how it feels." Another one knelt at the letter table, not to write, but just to sit. He didn't speak. He just needed to be still, surrounded by something that looked like what he hadn't been able to say. Sophia walked over and gently handed him a blank sheet. He nodded, took the pen, and began to write. That evening, Keanu and Sophia sat together in the quiet of the now empty gallery. "Do you think Liam knows?" she asked. Keanu looked around at the walls, the drawings, the full chest of handwritten truths. "I think," he said softly, "he's starting to." They didn't need applause. They didn't need headlines. They just needed people to walk in, see what was on the wall, and whisper, "Me too," because that was enough. By the end of the week, visitors had begun bringing others. Not just friends, survivors, mothers who'd lost sons, brothers who hadn't spoken in years, former inmates who came in quietly and left with red eyes and lighter shoulders. One man came 3 days in a row and sat on the bench facing the drawing of the silhouette, with cracks pouring light behind it. On the third day, he approached Keanu, who happened to be sitting nearby. "I haven't drawn in 10 years, the man said, voice low. "I used to, but I lost the point." Keanu stood. "You saw it again?" The man nodded, emotion tight in his chest. "Yeah, in that drawing. It reminded me that I used to tell the truth through lines, even when no one was listening." He left a note in the chest. "To whoever made that sketch, you just gave me my voice back." Keanu read it that evening, alone, with the gallery lights dimmed. Then, without speaking, he opened his journal and wrote a single sentence. "Some reflections don't show us who we were. They show us who we're still becoming." At the end of the exhibit's first week, the foundation added a new feature, a mirror, real, unbroken. Framed in dark wood, it hung in the corner beneath soft light. Next to it, a sign read, "Look here," then, "Write to the version of yourself that forgot you were still worth seeing." Visitors stood there longer than expected. Some walked up with confidence and left in tears. Others avoided it at first, then circled back at the last moment. One letter found in the chest was addressed not to the artist or to Keanu, but to the person in the mirror. "I forgive you for hiding, for surviving instead of thriving, for not knowing how to be loved. You're not broken, you're just beginning." The impact reached beyond the walls. School counselors began requesting prints of the drawings. Educational facilities called asking if the exhibit could travel. A nonprofit wrote to say they wanted to create a digital archive called Fragments of Light to collect anonymous expressions from youth who couldn't speak their stories out loud. And all of it, every ripple, had started with one boy. A boy who once believed silence was safer than hope. A boy who mailed a sketch instead of a cry for help. A boy who now, through the lines he once drew in fear, had taught others the art of being seen. And on the wall, that unfinished mirror still hung. No reflection inside. Because the next face in it could be anyone's. The envelope was thicker than most. Sophia found it in the second mail delivery of the day, slipped between donation forms and event requests. It was addressed by hand in blue ink with a return label from a middle school in Fresno. She brought it straight to Keanu, who was sitting near the gallery's new mirror installation, reading through the latest letters from visitors. When she handed it over, she didn't say anything, just waited. Keanu opened it carefully. Inside was a letter on school letterhead, folded neatly with rounded corners. He unfolded it, and began to read. Dear Mr. Reeves and the Foundation team, my name is Elena Garcia. I'm a counselor at Oak Ridge Middle School. I wanted to thank you for the fragments exhibit. I visited during the break and returned to my students changed. Many of our kids here feel invisible. Some are in foster care, some have parents incarcerated, some are just surviving. I didn't explain the full exhibit to them, only told them about a boy who drew mirrors to say things he couldn't speak. I gave them blank pages and said, if you had a mirror that could speak for you, what would it say? We call them mirror messages. I thought you might want to see a few. Tucked behind the letter were a stack of small colored pages. Some were torn from notebooks, others drawn on printer paper with crayon, pencil, or marker. Keanu slowly leafed through the first few. One said, I feel cracked but still here. Another, in block letters, if someone sees this, please keep looking. A third, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay just because I smile. Keanu sat back, heart heavy but alive. He looked up at Sophia, who was already wiping her eyes. These are from middle schoolers, she whispered. Keanu nodded. At the bottom of the letter, a final paragraph caught his attention. We talk a lot in schools about safety and structure, but sometimes what our kids need most is space to be honest without being judged. Your exhibit didn't just show drawings, it opened a door. Thank you for giving us the language to begin. With gratitude, Elena Garcia. Keanu looked down at the mirror messages again, spread across the table like small windows into rooms no one had entered before. Then, without hesitation, he said, I want to go there. Sophia looked up. To the school? To the kids, he said. To the voices that drew these. Because sometimes the loudest echoes come from the smallest hands. Oak Ridge Middle School wasn't grand. Brick walls, low fences, sun-faded banners with words like respect and resilience lining the walkway. The front office buzzed with routine, late slips, intercom calls, a gentle hum of tired energy. But in room 18, something extraordinary had taken root. When Keanu stepped into Ms. Garcia's classroom, the students were already seated, waiting. Not fidgeting, just quiet. Like they'd been told something important was about to happen and decided to meet it with stillness. Everyone, Ms. Garcia said gently, this is Keanu. No applause, just a collective breath. Keanu offered a small smile. I came because your words found me. He looked around. The walls were lined with mirror drawings, some literal, some abstract. A few had phrases written beneath them. One read, sometimes I feel invisible, but maybe that's just because no one is really looking. Another, I want to stop breaking every time someone speaks too loud. One, with barely more than stick figures and a crooked oval, said, I'm still figuring out what I look like when I'm not afraid. Keanu walked along the wall, slowly, stopping in front of each. Then he turned back to the class. These are some of the bravest drawings I've ever seen. A hand raised, a boy in the second row, his hoodie sleeves pulled down past his fingers. Did you ever feel like that? He asked. Keanu nodded. Yes, especially when I didn't know how to say what hurt, so I carried it around like it was normal, until someone reminded me it wasn't. The room stayed quiet, but not uncomfortable, more like a deep breath held together. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out one of Liam's original sketches, the copy of the cracked mirror with the light breaking through the silhouette. I want to show you something a boy once gave me, he said, holding it up. He didn't think anyone would care. He just drew what he couldn't say, and it ended up helping more people than he'll probably ever meet. The kids leaned in, eyes wide. Then Keanu asked, would anyone be willing to read theirs out loud? There was hesitation. Then one girl raised her hand. Her voice was small but steady. My mirror said, I'm still here. That's all, just that. Keanu nodded. That's enough to keep building. The girl smiled, barely, but it stayed. And around the room, a little more light seemed to settle. Because when reflection is welcomed, not feared, it becomes a place to begin again. As the classroom visit neared its end, Ms. Garcia stepped to the front of the room and gave a quiet nod to one of the students near the window. A boy in a faded red shirt stood up, walked to the back corner, and returned with something wrapped in brown paper and taped at the edges. He placed it gently on the desk in front of Keanu. "We made you something," the boy said. Keanu looked to Ms. Garcia. "They asked if they could give something back," she explained, "something that would carry their names." Keanu carefully peeled back the paper. Inside was a single framed drawing, a full mirror, whole, shining, colored with care. Around it, like constellations in orbit, were dozens of handwritten names, some first names, some initials, a few nicknames. Beneath it, in silver pen, a single sentence. "Thank you for seeing us." Keanu stared at it, his hand still resting on the frame. He swallowed once, then looked around the room. "I don't know how to say thank you that feels big enough." One of the students spoke from the back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just don't forget us." "I won't," Keanu said. "None of this, none of you, is forgettable." Ms. Garcia placed a hand on his shoulder. "They've seen a lot of people come and go. But this landed. I've never seen them this quiet and this brave at the same time." Keanu nodded slowly. "It's because they've finally been allowed to be both." He held the framed piece to his chest as if it were something fragile and sacred. "I'll hang this at the foundation," he said, "right next to the original sketches." The class brightened at that, because now they weren't just responding to something brave, they were part of it. Before leaving, Keanu stood by the wall one last time. He glanced again at the mirror messages, some neat and careful, others messy and raw. He found the one he'd read in the letter. "I feel cracked but still here." He touched the corner of the page lightly. "You're more than here," he whispered. "You're becoming." Then he turned, framed gift in hand, and walked out through the doors, quietly, without spectacle. Outside, the sun had come through for the first time that day, and as he stepped onto the sidewalk, Keanu knew this wasn't the end of a visit. It was the beginning of something echoing, something that would live not on museum walls but in notebooks and sketch pads and quiet corners of classrooms, where mirrors kept being drawn and kids kept being seen. The day after Keanu returned from Oak Ridge Middle School, he sat in his office, the framed student mirror still leaning against the wall beside his desk. Sophia stepped in with her laptop tucked under one arm and a quiet kind of urgency in her eyes. "I think it's time for the next post," she said. Keanu looked up. "What are you thinking?" Sophia turned her screen toward him. On it, a single sentence. "Have you ever felt broken but kept going? Share what helped you keep your reflection." Keanu read it once, then again. "It's not just about survival," he said. "It's about what held us together." Sophia nodded. "That's why it's the right question." They posted it that afternoon. No name, no image, just the question. Within the first hour, it had 2,000 likes. Then the comments started. "My daughter. Even when I didn't think I deserved her love. My grandmother's piano. I played the night I wanted to disappear. It kept me here." A stranger on the bus who said, "You look like you've been carrying something heavy. I'm glad you made it." Some were long. Some were just 4 words. I drew. I stayed. But the post didn't stop at stories. People began uploading images. Rough mirror sketches drawn on napkins, elaborate digital art, charcoal outlines from correctional facilities, stick figures from kids as young as 6. One woman photographed a hand mirror with lipstick scribbled on it. "Still here." Sophia turned to Keanu 3 days later, holding up her phone. "They're not just posting them, they're mailing them." She opened a drawer beside his desk. Inside were envelopes, dozens already, many marked with just a return city and state, some postmarked from shelters, others from rural towns. "They're calling them mirror letters," she said, "and they're showing up faster than we can catalog." Keanu stood, walked to the hallway that led to the gallery, and stared at the blank wall across from Liam's sketches. "This one's for them," he said. So they cleared it. painted it soft gray, and began to hang the first wave. Some mirrors were drawn crooked, some were cracked open. One had no reflection, just words. "I'm building one." Another, from a man in recovery, showed a mirror surrounded by jagged edges, but inside it, a small green sprout broke through the center. They didn't curate. They didn't filter. They just let them speak. And soon the hallway began to hum, not with voices, but with proof. Proof that broken didn't mean gone, and cracked still let in the light. By the end of the first week, the mirror wall had doubled in size. There wasn't space anymore for neat rows. The team began layering sketches, carefully, respectfully, one overlapping the corner of another. Each new addition fit like a puzzle piece from someone's soul. The lines weren't straight, the papers weren't perfect, but together they made something undeniable. Visitors walked slower now, tracing their fingers along the edges of drawings. Some brought their families. Others came alone and sat for hours. A few left without saying a word, only returning days later with their own sketches folded in their coat pockets. One woman, maybe in her 70s, walked in with a cane and a wrinkled brown envelope. Inside was a sketch done in soft blue pencil. It showed a mirror filled with waves, rising, cresting, crashing. In the middle, a tiny boat with a figure seated inside, holding a candle. On the back, she had written, "This was me at 16. It's still me, but now I row." The foundation staff began scanning and archiving the sketches online. Each one was photographed, cataloged, and stored in a digital gallery titled The Reflection Project. Within days, schools, churches, halfway homes, and mental health centers began requesting access. Some created mirror-making workshops. Others built traveling exhibits using replicas. One high school art teacher in Ohio launched an entire semester unit around it. Her students mailed in a collective collage of 43 mirrors. Some painted, some etched in foil, some built from wood and metal scraps found in their garages. A group of inmates at a women's correctional facility in Texas sent a letter with a single sentence. "We thought no one would ever ask us what we still saw in ourselves." Attached were 34 mirror sketches, all anonymous, all powerful. Keanu walked the foundation hallway each night before he left. What began as a soft gray space had become something alive, glowing with messages from every corner of the country. Some mirrors reflected pain. Others showed resilience. But every one of them said the same thing in 1,000 different ways. "I am still here." It wasn't just art. It was a declaration of endurance, of memory, of the right to be seen, cracks and all. And in every sketch, Keanu could see a line leading back to one boy, one sketch, one mirror, and a quiet note that whispered, "You made me believe I still mattered." Keanu stood before the mirror wall one quiet evening, well past visitor hours. The hallway lights had dimmed, but soft track lighting glowed above the sketches, casting gentle shadows. Some were frayed at the corners now. A few were curling away from the wall, their tape loosening with time, but none had fallen. That mattered. Sophia joined him, holding a fresh stack of envelopes. "More today," she said. "A teacher from Maine, a kid from El Paso, a mother in Detroit." He placed them gently on the end of the bench. Keanu looked over at the wall. "It's not slowing down, is it?" "No," Sophia said, "and I don't think it's supposed to." They stood in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't empty, but full of something neither of them could quite name. Then Keanu asked, "What do you think this is now?" Sophia looked at him. "It started as a post, then it became a conversation. Now, it's a movement." He nodded. "Not for policy, not even for justice, necessarily." "No," she agreed. "It's for recognition." Keanu turned toward one of the newest mirror drawings. A child's handprint smudged in charcoal, with a sentence scribbled below in green marker. "If you see me, I'll remember I exist." He exhaled slowly. "That's everything." And it was. In a world that often told people they were too broken to be visible, this movement was saying something else entirely. You are not invisible. You are not too late. You are still becoming. The Foundation began calling it the Reflection Archive, but the people who mailed in their sketches had another name for it. They called it the Mirror Letters. And it grew, not like a campaign fueled by trend, but like a flame passed hand to hand, quiet, steady, undeniable. Hospice centers requested mirror sketch kits for patients at end of life. Shelters distributed blank mirror outlines to teenagers who no longer trusted their own voices. A youth poet laureate wrote a piece inspired by Liam's story that ended with the line, "I'm not what they wrote in their file. I'm what I draw when no one's watching." And still, the sketches came. Some fragile, some fierce. All true, because the point had never been to fix the cracks. It was to honor them. To hold up a mirror, not just for the artists, but for the world. To remember what it looks like when a human being refuses to disappear. There was no post announcing the visit, no photographers, no Foundation crew. Just Keanu Reeves in a plain jacket, walking through the metal detector at Ridgeway once again, a brown paper bag in hand. The guards knew him by now. They greeted him with nods, no longer surprised, just quietly respectful. They escorted him to the same visitation room. Gray walls, scratched metal table, plastic chairs that always sounded louder than they should. He waited there alone, glancing occasionally at the bag on the table. Inside were 3 sketch pads, 2 tins of colored pencils, a sharpener, and 1 folded letter. When Liam finally walked in, his hair slightly longer, frame a bit stronger, Keanu stood and gave him a nod. "No team today?" Liam asked with a half-smile as he sat. "Just me," Keanu replied. They shook hands. It wasn't formal, it wasn't casual. It was something steady between the two. "What's in the bag?" Liam asked, tapping the table. Keanu slid it across. "Supplies," he said, "but also something someone sent for you." Liam raised an eyebrow, then reached inside and pulled out the folded letter. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing the paper. The handwriting was loopy and a little uneven, like someone still figuring out how to say things clearly. Liam read aloud, "Dear artist, I'm 12. My school did mirror drawings after our teacher saw your art. Mine was empty at first, but then I drew a sun in the corner, then a tree, then my dog. I don't know if I'm doing it right, but when I finished, it didn't feel empty anymore. Thank you. My..." Liam stopped, eyes locked on the paper. Keanu waited. After a few seconds, Liam whispered, "She's 12. Yet he reread the last lines, more slowly this time. "Mine was empty, now it's not." The words hung there. Not dramatic, not loud, just honest. Liam folded the paper again, this time with more care. Then he looked at Keanu. "You think I matter outside these walls?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "You already do." Liam swallowed hard. "It's weird. I thought if I ever got out, I'd start over, leave all this behind. But now..." He tapped the sketch pad in the bag. "Maybe this is what I'm supposed to carry with me." Keanu nodded. "You don't have to erase where you've been to become who you are." Liam looked down at the paper again. She drew a sun. "I used to draw clouds." "Maybe both belong," Keanu said. Outside the thick windows, the day was overcast, but a little brighter than usual. Liam slid the sketch pad from the bag and opened it slowly. The first page was blank. He stared at it for a moment, the kind of long stare that said he wasn't just seeing white paper, he was seeing what might live on it. "I haven't drawn in a while," he admitted. "Not since the exhibit went up. I thought maybe it was over, like that was the thing. That was the purpose." Keanu didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Maybe that was just the first chapter." Liam traced the top edge of the paper with his fingertip. "It's weird. People out there, they see my work. But in here, I'm still just a number. Still eating the same meals, still hearing the same keys jingle down the hall every night." He paused. "But somehow, that letter from Maya, It made me feel like I was still moving, even if the world doesn't look like it. Keanu nodded. That's what meaning does. It moves even when we can't. Liam opened the pencil tin. The colors inside were arranged neatly, fresh, untouched. He picked one up, a soft blue, and rolled it between his fingers. Do you ever wonder, he asked, if what we do actually lands where it's supposed to? Keanu smiled. Every day. But then something like this shows up. A girl drawing her dog into an empty mirror because you made her believe she could. Liam shook his head gently. I never thought I'd matter to someone who didn't even know my name. That's the thing about truth, Keanu said. It doesn't need introductions, it just needs to be felt. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Liam opened the first page of the sketch pad and stared at it again. Then, without warning, he began to draw. Keanu didn't interrupt, he just watched. Liam's lines were slower now, more deliberate, not tentative, just careful, like someone respecting the weight of what they were about to say. It wasn't a mirror this time. It was something else. A hand reaching down, and another hand reaching up. No faces, no names. Just contact. Just connection. He looked up once, checking Keanu's expression. Keanu nodded slowly, eyes a little glassier than before. Liam kept drawing. This time, he wasn't drawing what he couldn't say. He was drawing what had already been heard. And now he was speaking in the only way that had ever felt natural to him. With lines and truth. The hand reaching upward was open, fingers slightly bent. The one reaching down had stronger lines, but no detail. It didn't need any. It wasn't about who the hands belonged to, it was about the space between them. Small, but closing. Liam shaded the background in light strokes, creating depth. Not darkness, just something real, the kind of depth that made the contact feel more certain, more grounded, more like hope. When he finished, he held up the sketch for Keanu to see. Keanu leaned forward. It's beautiful, he said quietly. Liam looked at the paper, then back at Keanu. Do you think someday, when I'm out, I could work with the foundation? I don't mean on stage or anything, just with kids, with the quiet ones. Keanu's answer came without hesitation. You already are. Liam blinked. But I'm still in here, and your sketches are out there. Your words, your mirror, the truth you put into the world doesn't wait for permission. He set the drawing gently on the table between them. You don't need to be free to matter, Keanu said. You already crossed that line. Liam let the words settle. He didn't argue with them. For once, he believed them. There was a knock on the door. Time was up. Liam stood and carefully slid the sketch into the back of the pad. Keanu stood too, slower, more reluctant. Do you want me to keep it here? Liam asked, holding up the pad. Or send it out? Keanu looked at the cover, then at Liam. Keep it. Not everything needs to be shared right away. Some truths are just for us, until we're ready. Liam nodded. The guard opened the door. Liam stepped through, but paused just before it shut behind him. He turned back and said, Tell her thank you, Maya. I will, Keanu promised. And if you ever want to write her back? I think I already did, Liam said, patting the sketch pad. Then the door closed. Keanu sat back down for a moment, alone at the table. The room wasn't less full without Liam. It was just quieter. But in that quiet lived something unshakable. A story that had rippled outward, without press or noise. A boy who had taught the world how to speak without shouting. And a man who had shown up, not to save, not to fix, but simply to see. The sketch Liam left behind wasn't destined for a frame. Not yet. But it would stay. Because not every reflection belongs on a wall. Some are meant to stay near the heart, until the day they're ready to become someone else's light. The dining room at the Fairmount Hotel was gold-lit and quiet. Waiters moved between tables like shadows, placing plates with precision. Around the room sat donors, community leaders, and quiet benefactors, people who believed in change but preferred to write checks instead of stories. At the front stood a modest stage with a single podium. A black velvet curtain hung behind it. The foundation banner was simple, draped low, understated, just the way Keanu liked it. He waited backstage, holding a folded sheet of paper. Not notes, but a printed letter. The one from Maya, the girl who once drew an empty mirror and filled it with a sun, a tree, and her dog. Sophia approached with a nod. "They're ready." Keanu stepped out, no applause, just the hum of attention shifting his way. He walked to the mic, placed the letter down, and looked out over the crowd. "I want to tell you a story," he said. He didn't say the boy's name. He didn't need to. "There's a young man I've come to know," he began. "He's an artist. He doesn't have formal training. He's never been to an opening. But his sketches have been seen by thousands." He paused. "And they've changed people." The room grew still. "Hell didn't ask for that," Keanu continued. "He didn't make art to be praised. He made it because it was the only way to speak. Because there were things he needed to say and words weren't safe. He let the silence stretch, just a breath longer than expected. "Some of you saw his exhibit," he said. "Some of you wrote letters. One came from a 12-year-old girl. It said, 'I don't know if I'm doing it right, but my mirror isn't empty anymore.'" He picked up the letter and read it aloud, every word steady. When he finished, he set it down again. "That letter reached him," Keanu said, "and when it did, he asked me something. 'Do you think I matter outside these walls?' He looked up and held the pause. I told him the truth. He already does." Somewhere in the crowd, a fork touched a plate. Then stillness returned. We measure strength by what we can see, by speeches and stage lights, but the strongest people I've ever met don't raise their voices. They don't post about impact. They just reflect. Keanu looked around the room. "And that's what heroes do. They reflect the light they never got, quietly, fiercely, without asking for applause." He stepped back slightly from the mic. "Tonight," he said, "I'm not asking you to change a life. I'm asking you to recognize one." The silence after Keanu stepped back wasn't empty. It was charged. No one reached for their wine glasses. No one whispered. It was as if the room had collectively leaned inward and forgotten to exhale. Then, slowly, one woman in the front row placed her napkin down and stood. She didn't speak. She just wiped at the corner of her eye and sat back down. Across the room, a man with a loosened tie opened the small card in front of him, the one labeled "Pledge Envelope," and began to write without looking up. No music swelled. No dramatic lights changed. But something had shifted. The program moved on. Another speaker approached the podium to thank the guests, to speak about the mission of the foundation, the quarterly reports, the long-term vision. People clapped, nodded politely. But still, the atmosphere felt different, like Keanu had opened a door that wouldn't close again. After dinner, as guests mingled quietly around the perimeter, several approached Keanu, not with praise, but with questions. Could that exhibit travel? Would our local youth center qualify for the drawing project? Do you take handwritten mirror letters from adults too? One man leaned in and said, "I was one of those boys. We didn't have art, just metal bars and long nights. If someone had handed me a pencil instead of a sentence." He trailed off, but Keanu met his gaze and simply said, "It's not too late." Later, Sophia approached Keanu with a tablet in hand. Her voice was low, but the awe in it was clear. "You should see this," she said. On the screen were the first tallies from the donor envelopes collected that night. 30 new arts programs, fully funded, across juvenile centers in 5 states, with enough left over to create portable mirror kits for schools with no access to art supplies. Keanu didn't blink at the number. He only asked one thing. "Can we send Liam the list?" Sophia smiled. "Already printing it." That night, Keanu stayed after the last guest had gone. He walked the perimeter of the empty ballroom, past chairs with coats draped over them, past half-drunk coffee cups and folded programs. He stopped at the edge of the stage, looking at the spot where he had stood. No cameras had recorded the moment. No live streams had captured the silence. But still, something real had happened there. A story had been spoken. A boy had been honored. And a movement had grown not through power, but through presence. The next morning, Keanu stood in the main hall of the foundation beside a table of outgoing mail. He placed the printed list of newly funded programs into an envelope addressed to Ridgeway Correctional Facility. On the back, he wrote in small, careful letters, "You started this." No signature, just the truth. Down the hallway, staff were already clearing space on a second wall. More mirror sketches had arrived. Sophia carried a new stack under her arm, flipping through them slowly as she walked. "I think we're going to need a bigger archive," she joked, but there was a tremor in her voice. One sketch showed a broken mirror stitched together with thread. Another had words drawn inside the frame. "My reflection has scars, but I'm still worth looking at." As they hung the newest contributions, Keanu noticed a boy watching from the lobby, probably 12, maybe 13, sitting beside his guardian. The boy held a sketch pad in his lap, but hadn't opened it. Keanu crouched beside him. "Want to show me what you've got?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated, then slowly lifted the cover. The sketch was simple, just a cracked mirror, but in the corner was a small beam of light, shaped like a star. "I didn't think it was good," the boy said. Keanu nodded. "That star makes it more than good." He looked down again. "Do you think people will understand it?" Keanu smiled softly. "I think they already do." Back in his office, Keanu sat for a long moment, watching the city through the window. Somewhere out there, people were reading letters, drawing sketches, writing things they had never dared speak. And none of it had started with a press campaign. It had started with a mirror, and a boy who drew it because he had nothing else to say. Now that boy was reminding the world that healing wasn't loud, that visibility didn't always wear a spotlight, that quiet heroes don't vanish, they reflect. They build movements from notebooks. They carry truth in pencil strokes. And they teach others that just being here, scarred and searching, is its own kind of strength. That evening, Keanu received a short message from Ridgeway. It came from Liam. There were no long sentences, just one line, typed on the prison email system. "I saw the list. I still don't get how this happened, but I'll draw something for each one." Keanu stared at the screen and smiled. Not because it was done, but because it wasn't. Because that's what real change looks like. A boy, a mirror, and a truth that keeps drawing forward. Liam Cruz didn't expect the hallway to be so quiet. The first step outside Ridgeway was lighter than he imagined, not dramatic, not filled with applause. Just a pair of soft sneakers on warm pavement and the hum of cars in the distance. His bag slung over his shoulder held only a few things: clothes, 2 sketch pads, and the folded letter from Maya. The rest he left behind. A van was waiting for him at the curb, plain white with a county logo on the side. A social worker named Denise gave him a soft smile and a clipboard to sign. "Welcome to your new chapter," she said gently. The supervised living facility sat on the edge of the city. Not quite a neighborhood, not quite a shelter. It was a quiet house on a quiet street, 2 floors, 5 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon from the last batch of donated muffins. They showed Liam to his room. It was small, just a twin bed, a dresser, a desk. The window looked out toward a tree that still held its leaves, even this late into the season. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time, not touching anything. Not yet. Later that afternoon, as he unpacked his bag, someone knocked softly. Liam opened the door. It was Keanu. He was alone, dressed simply, holding a long rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. Liam blinked. "You came." Keanu gave a small smile. "I promised." They sat down on the edge of the bed. Keanu laid the package across his knees and untied the twine carefully. Inside was a custom wooden frame, not glossy or ornate, just smooth, hand-finished maple. Inside it, perfectly centered, was the sketch. Liam's sketch. The cracked mirror with light breaking through the outline of a boy seated in shadow. "I thought this belonged here," Keanu said quietly. Liam reached out and touched the glass. His fingers hovered at the spot where the light passed through the boy's chest. "You kept it," he whispered. "I kept everything," Keanu replied, "because it mattered." Liam leaned the frame against the wall above the headboard. He didn't hang it right away. He just needed to see it there. "I always thought," Liam said slowly, "that being seen meant being judged. Measured." He glanced at Keanu. "But this kind of being seen, it feels like breathing." Keanu nodded. "It is." They sat in silence again. The kind of silence that doesn't erase the past. It builds a future underneath it. Over the next few weeks, Liam moved through the world like someone learning to walk again. He got a part-time job at a local community garden through the facility's employment program. Just mornings watering, weeding, trimming, nothing complicated. But there was something healing about it, something predictable and real. Every time he pressed his fingers into the soil, it grounded him. The staff at the house gave him space, but they noticed things. That he kept his room tidy, that he always washed his own dishes, that he'd started sketching again, usually at night, the desk lamp casting soft light across the paper. But the thing they noticed most? He smiled sometimes. Not big, loud grins, but the kind of small smile that said something had shifted deep beneath the surface. One afternoon, Keanu visited again. No ceremony, just 2 cups of coffee from the place down the street and a folded printout of another letter. Liam opened it slowly. "Dear artist, we showed your drawing to our 5th grade class." One student asked, "Did he really mean to let the light through the cracks?" We told them yes, because sometimes light doesn't wait for permission. It just finds a way. Liam folded the letter back into thirds and stared at the floor. "I used to think I had to fix everything about myself before I was allowed to show up," he said. "Like if I didn't walk in whole, I wasn't allowed in the room." Keanu took a slow sip of coffee. "But you're here now." Liam nodded. "And no one's asking me to pretend." He looked up toward the sketch hanging above his bed. He'd finally mounted it, centered, level, facing the light from the window. "I look at that every morning," he said. "It reminds me that I made something that mattered." He paused, then added, "That I mattered." Keanu watched him closely. "You still do." Liam leaned back in the chair. "I'm not looking for the world to notice me. I used to think I had to get loud to be heard, but I don't anymore." Keanu nodded, saying nothing. Liam smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the framed sketch. "I don't need the world to see me," he said. "Just one person who never looked away." And that was enough. Not applause, not recognition, just the steady presence of someone who saw through the cracks and waited long enough for the light to come through. A few days later, the director of the supervised living home asked Liam if he'd consider leading a small evening art session with new residents. Nothing formal, just a chance to sit, sketch, and maybe talk. Liam hesitated. "I'm not a teacher," he said. "You don't have to be," the director replied. "You just have to be real." That night, Liam sat at the kitchen table with 3 other young men. A stack of pencils, blank pages, no agenda, just a quiet space and soft conversation. He didn't tell them what to draw. He just drew first. A mirror still cracked, but this one had vines growing around the frame, roots curling beneath it, new things sprouting from broken places. He didn't explain it. He didn't need to. The others followed. One drew flames. One drew a storm cloud. One drew a hand reaching out, but not quite touching anything. And by the end of the hour, they weren't strangers anymore. Just people who had sat in silence and shared a kind of truth most had never spoken aloud. Later that night, Liam returned to his room and sat beneath the sketch that now hung over his bed. He reached for his notebook and wrote one line at the bottom of a fresh page. "Healing isn't when you stop being broken. It's when you stop hiding it. Then he closed the notebook, leaned back, and let the quiet wrap around him. Not as loneliness, but as stillness, as peace. From outside, he could hear the wind moving through the trees, cars passing faintly in the distance. But inside that room, there was only one sound that mattered. His breath. Steady, present, still here. And on the wall, the sketch caught a bit of moonlight through the window, the light falling softly through the part of the mirror where it broke. It shimmered. Just a little, but enough. Some people shatter, others reflect, and some somehow do both and still shine. Liam Cruz didn't become a symbol. He didn't want to. What he became was something rarer, real. In a world that moves fast and forgets faster, he made room for stillness, for broken edges, for the kind of stories that don't get told on stage, but survive in quiet corners and paper margins. The mirror in his room stayed above his bed. Every morning he saw it before he stood, and every night it reminded him that cracks don't erase meaning. They let something through. He began sketching again more regularly, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Some days he drew trees, others just lines. Once he drew a mirror that reflected nothing but sky. At the foundation, the mirror letters wall grew beyond capacity. A second wing was open to hold them, then a third. Visitors came from across the country. Students, parents, former inmates, teachers. Some came to leave drawings. Others came just to see the ones already there. But the real shift wasn't in the art. It was in the eyes of the people walking through. They left slower than they arrived, more thoughtful, more whole. At a press event months later, Keanu was asked if the movement had succeeded. He paused, then said, "We don't measure this by headlines or numbers. We measure it by the boy who asked, 'Do I matter?' and the thousands who whispered back, 'Yes, so do I.'" That's what Liam became. Not a spotlight, but a signal fire. The kind that doesn't blind you. The kind that guides you home. And for every person who's ever felt invisible, or silenced, or fractured, let this story be what you hold on to. You don't have to be complete to be seen. You don't need applause to be real. And sometimes just one person who doesn't look away is enough to carry you through. Sometimes a mirror doesn't reflect who you are. Sometimes it shows who you're becoming. And sometimes all it takes is one person to notice that you're still standing in front of it, still trying. That person doesn't have to be famous. They don't need a platform or a camera. They just need to stay. Liam's story isn't rare because he drew something powerful. It's rare because someone stayed long enough to see it, stayed long enough to say, "I remember." And now, the question moves to you. Have you ever had someone show up for you when you felt forgotten? Not to save you, just to stay. Just to reflect something back you forgot was still in you? Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was a stranger who said the right thing at the right time, and it kept you from falling apart. If someone did that for you even once, tell us in the comments. Because those moments matter. And if you've been that person for someone else, we want to hear that too. Because maybe your story is the one someone's waiting to see. And maybe it becomes the next light breaking through. So tell us, what helped you keep your reflection? What stopped you from disappearing? What gave you the courage to draw again, speak again, show up again? Drop your story below, because someone out there needs to read it. And if you have an idea for the next story we should tell with Keanu, we're listening. Because the stories we share shape the world we live in. And the world needs more stories about the ones who reflect, the ones who stay, the quiet heroes who don't vanish. In one quiet room, on one quiet wall, a new sketch hangs beside Liam's. It's simple, just a mirror, but this one isn't cracked. Thinks it isn't perfect either. It's made of small pieces, softly joined, gently mismatched, each edge touched by a different hand. One from Maya, one from a student in Fresno, one from a mother who wrote after losing her son, One from a teacher who said they finally understood what silence looked like. Piece by piece, they made something whole. Not because it never broke, but because it refused to stay broken. This is what healing looks like. Not loud, not sudden, just steady, drawn line by line, heart by heart. And if you're still holding on, still looking into a mirror that hasn't yet reflected something worth keeping, hold on longer, because light doesn't always arrive fast. Sometimes it shows up through someone else's eyes, or someone else's words, or a cracked mirror that still dares to shine. The screen fades to black. But before it does, one final image appears. A slow animation of Liam's original sketch, the cracked mirror. But this time, the pieces gently begin to shift, not to hide the cracks, but to welcome the light. And across the top, in quiet lettering, some people shatter, others reflect, and some somehow do both, and still shine. Now it's your turn. If this story moved you, share it. Tag the person who saw you when no one else did, and help someone else find the strength to draw their reflection back into the world. Because the mirror you build might be the one that saves somebody else. And for those of you waiting for the next story, it's coming. He saved a boy once, but the boy's mother? She has a story no one ever heard. And it changes everything.